So finally, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the new international SCI exercise guidelines. So over the past 2 years, I've worked with an international team to develop scientific exercise guidelines for adults with spinal cord injury. And to develop these guidelines, we used the same standardized, rigorous, gold standard approach to guideline development that the World Health Organization utilized to develop its guidelines for the general population. So I actually, there's a handout of this on some of the seats, but there are far more people here than we anticipated. So please, if you'd like a copy of this, we can get you one at the end of the workshop. So as part of this process, the first step was to develop to conduct a systematic review of all of the studies that have been conducted on the effects of exercise on cardiometabolic health or fitness in people living with spinal cord injury. Jan van der Schuur led that review, and it's been published in Neurology. After that review, we took the synthesis of evidence, and then we gave it to 3 expert panels. And these expert panels were comprised of people living with spinal cord injury, clinicians, scientists, and organizations that represent people with spinal cord injury. We conducted a European panel, a Canadian panel, and then an international panel. And those panels were tasked with the goal of reviewing that evidence, deliberating it, and then formulating the physical activity guidelines. So the results of those deliberations were 2 guidelines. So the first guideline is a fitness guideline, and it essentially reaffirms the 2011 SCI physical activity guideline. So this guideline states that for cardiorespiratory fitness and muscle strength benefits, adults with spinal cord injury should engage in at least 20 minutes of moderate to vigorous intensity aerobic activity twice per week, and 3 sets of strength training exercises for each major functioning muscle group 2 times per week. We were very pleased that we were able to develop a brand new exercise guideline. This is an exercise guideline to improve cardiometabolic health. And this guideline stipulates that for cardiometabolic health benefits, adults with SCI are suggested to engage in at least 30 minutes of moderate to vigorous intensity aerobic exercise 3 times per week. After the panels met and the guidelines were complete, before we published them, we circulated them to both consumers and clinicians to ensure that the guidelines were perceived as appropriate, useful, and clear. So the guideline, the paper that describes the guideline development process and the guidelines themselves was published in Spinal Cord just last night. It's an open access publication, so anybody can download it. So with the publication of that paper, we're now ready to begin the next step. And I'd like to emphasize, these are scientific exercise guidelines. They're based on the best available scientific evidence. However, they haven't yet been written or translated in a way that's appropriate, I think, for clinical or for community use. So in January in Canada, we'll begin that process of knowledge translation, of engaging patients, public, clinicians, anybody who might be using the guidelines to ensure that we're languaging the guidelines appropriately and that we're accompanying the dissemination of those guidelines with tools, products, services that people need to actually implement the guidelines in the community and clinical practice. Once that process is done, we'll publish that, but we really want to strongly encourage people in other countries and other contexts to take the scientific guidelines and to work with your clients, with your patients, with end users to ensure that you're also languaging the guidelines and presenting them in a way that makes most sense for the people who will use them. And with that, I'd like to thank you very much for your attention this morning. And please, if you have any questions or would like further information, this is how you can contact us. Thank you.